The morning mist still clings to the hedgerows. Damp earth, the faint tang of diesel and cordite in the air. From behind a curtain of shattered trees, a column of German Panzer IVs crawls forward, their tracks grinding over broken stone. The crews are confident, almost amused. They've seen the American Shermans before. Thin armor, weak gun, easy kills, Tommy cookers, one gunner mutters over the radio using the German nickname that means death trap. Laughter crackles through the static. They've burned dozens of them since landing on the Western Front. But ahead something is different. At the edge of a French field, half concealed by the morning fog, sits a Sherman tank. Its turret doesn't move. It looks abandoned. A perfect target. Range 800 meters, says Oberfeldwebel Karl Becker, lining up his shot. He exhales slowly, finger brushing the trigger of his 75mm gun. Then before he fires, the Sherman moves. The turret swings fast. Too fast. And instead of the stubby barrel they expect, Becker sees something longer, slimmer, unmistakably powerful. A flash. The sound hits half a second later, an echoing crack that punches through the air like lightning, splitting a tree. Becker's shell never leaves the barrel. The Firefly's 17-pounder round slams through his Panzer's frontal armor, igniting fuel and ammunition in a single heartbeat. The explosion rips through the calm of the countryside. Flames billow upward, licking the sky. Nearby crews freeze, trying to understand what just happened. The Sherman they mocked has just killed a Panzer with a single shot. And it isn't just one. Reports start coming over the net Panzers hit from impossible distances. Armor punched clean through. Crews wiped out before they even see the flash. Something new is on the battlefield, and it has teeth. The order came quietly. No headlines, no parades, just a classified directive from London. British engineers had been watching their tank crews die inside Shermans that couldn't penetrate a Tiger's front plate, no matter how close they got. Something had to change. At the Royal Ordnance Factory, a wiry, bespectacled engineer named W.G.K. Kilbourne leaned over blueprints with an idea that many thought insane. Fit the British 17-pounder anti-tank gun, a weapon nearly twice as long as the Sherman's original 75mm, into an American-made turret that wasn't built for it. It didn't fit. Not even close. The breach was too big, the recoil too violent. But the British were desperate, and desperation breeds ingenuity. So Kilbourne's team went to work cutting, grinding, re-engineering the very bones of the tank. They turned the gun sideways inside the turret, carving a hole in the back for the recoil system to fit, shifting the radio into a box welded on the rear. The ammunition was longer too, so loaders had to handle shells the size of their own legs. By spring 1944, the first prototype rolled out onto the testing ground at Lulworth Cove. When it fired, the recoil nearly tore the turret off, but when the smoke cleared, there was a clean hole through 6 inches of hardened steel, the kind used on Tiger armor. The impossible had been done. The Tommy cooker had been reborn. They called it the Sherman Firefly, but few outside the project even knew it existed. The British feared that if word leaked, the Germans would target these tanks first. So they camouflaged the Firefly's painting the extra long barrel in 2 tones to make it look shorter from a distance. To an enemy's eye, it was just another easy kill, until it wasn't. By June 6, 1944, fewer than 400 Fireflies were ready. They landed in Normandy alongside standard Shermans, mixed into units without distinction. To German reconnaissance, they seemed the same. But in truth, they were something entirely new, a hidden blade among dull knives. The men who would wield it didn't yet know they were about to rewrite the balance of armor in Western Europe. And somewhere near Villers-Bocage, a British gunner named Joe Eakins was waiting for his first shot. The hedgerows were quiet now, too quiet. The smoke from Becker's burning Panzer drifted low over the fields, a grey curtain that smelled of oil and scorched paint. On the British side, Trooper Joe Eakins, 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, sat hunched inside his Firefly. The steel walls rattled with every heartbeat. Through the gun sight he saw movement, more tanks, German shapes emerging through the haze. Tigers, 3 of them, his commander Sergeant Gordon whispered over the intercom. Range E1 200 yards, Eakins didn't answer. His right hand steadied the long 17-pounder gun, the weapon everyone called the Beast. He'd never fired it in combat before. His loader shoved a shell into the breech. The casing gleamed even in the dim light. The smell of propellant filled the turret. He tracked the lead Tiger, its massive silhouette gliding between the hedges like a battleship through fog. A few seconds of breathless silence. Then he squeezed the trigger. The Firefly lurched back. The roar was deafening. The shells screamed across the field, invisible but unstoppable. Impact. A bloom of fire and armor shards erupted from the Tiger's flank. Before the smoke cleared, Eakins had already loaded again. A second Tiger appeared, turret turning toward them too late. Another shot. Another kill. Within minutes, 3 Tigers lay shattered, one of them believed to be commanded by the famed Michael Wittmann, the German tank ace who had terrorized Allied armor for years. The radio came alive with disbelief. "Firefly's got him!" "It's done the impossible." German crews who once mocked the Shermans now hesitated at the sight of one with that longer barrel. They couldn't tell which was which until it fired, and by then it was over. Eakins sat back trembling, sweat cutting lines through the dust on his face. His ears rang with the echo of victory and fear. The Firefly had proven itself, but every shot invited retribution. Across the field, the remaining panzers began to fall back. The myth of German invincibility had cracked, but even as they retreated, new orders were coming from Berlin, orders that would turn Normandy into a steel graveyard. The days after Villers-Bocage were filled with an eerie tension. The hedgerows, once a peaceful patchwork of farms and fields, had become a maze of death. Every road, every corner, every patch of shadow could hide a tank. And now, for the first time, the Germans were afraid of what might be waiting there. German radio chatter told the story. Crews were ordered to engage Shermans only at extreme range. Officers demanded reports of this mysterious, long-barreled variant. Rumors spread that the British had secretly built a new class of heavy tank. Others whispered it was the Americans who'd developed a new gun that could pierce anything. But for the crews who saw the Firefly up close, it wasn't rumor, it was terror. Tiger commander from the 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion later recalled seeing one of his comrades' tanks hit by a single round that entered through the front and exited through the rear. As if it were paper, that image haunted him. For years he'd believed his armor was untouchable. Now nothing felt safe. In British units, confidence grew quietly. The men didn't boast they knew what one mistake meant, but there was pride now. The Firefly wasn't just a tank. It was redemption. Crews who once felt like targets were now hunters. Still, every battle had its cost. The 17-pounder's muzzle flash gave away their position instantly. Every time a Firefly fired, German gunners zeroed in within seconds. Many never got a second shot off. In the chaos of hedgerow combat, survival was measured in moments. On one grey morning near Caen, a Firefly under Lieutenant John Gorman rounded a corner straight into the path of a Tiger. At 50 yards, both tanks froze. Neither had time to turn. Gorman made a decision no textbook could explain. He rammed the Tiger head-on. The impact disabled both tanks. He and his crew bailed out, commandeered a nearby Sherman, and destroyed the immobilized Tiger with a point-blank shot. Stories like that spread through the ranks, proof that courage and improvisation could still tilt the balance against a stronger enemy. By July, the Germans no longer laughed at the Sherman. Reports from panzer commanders described a British variant with a gun of extraordinary range and power. Many units began to withdraw their Tigers from open combat, forced to fight defensively for the first time. The Allies had achieved something priceless, not just technological parity, but psychological dominance. And as Allied forces pushed deeper into France, one truth became clear to every German tanker left alive. The war of armor had changed forever, but behind every victory lay a question no one dared voice aloud: could the Firefly keep up with the storm that was coming next? By August 1944, the hedgerows of Normandy were littered with burnt-out armor, Tiger Hulks, twisted Panthers, and smoldering Shermans. But one pattern was unmistakable. Wherever the Firefly appeared, German tanks stopped advancing. In field reports recovered after the war, German commanders described a new kind of fear. "Our panzers no longer control the battlefield," one officer wrote. "We are being hunted." For the Wehrmacht's once proud panzer divisions, this was a crisis of faith. Their Tigers, engineered as symbols of unstoppable power, were suddenly being pierced from distances that defied reason. Even the most experienced crews began second-guessing their every move. Was that Sherman in the hedgerow just another easy kill, or was it a Firefly waiting to strike? The psychological effect was devastating. It wasn't just the loss of tanks, it was the loss of certainty. Meanwhile, in British lines, morale soared. Tank crews who'd once approached every engagement with dread now fought with quiet confidence. The Firefly's long barrel, once mocked even by Allied troops for looking absurdly large, had become a badge of honor. Soldiers would watch it fire and whisper, "That's the one that kills tigers." But even success came with unease. The Firefly's ammo racks were unstable, its armor still thin. Crews lived with the knowledge that while they could kill a tiger, one well-placed shell could erase them in an instant. Every victory was borrowed time. Still, in the larger war, the impact was undeniable. The Firefly had given the Allies something they'd never truly had before: tank parity. And as the Allies surged east toward the Seine, one truth began to crystallize. Both in Allied command and German high command alike, the era of the Tiger's dominance was over. In Berlin, engineers scrambled to respond. They sketched blueprints for new armor, heavier guns, thicker plating. But steel couldn't replace experience, and no design could overcome the tide of Allied industry. The Firefly wasn't just a tank. It was a message that the Allies could innovate just as ruthlessly as the Reich, and that realization would echo all the way to the gates of Berlin. By the autumn of 1944, the landscape of tank warfare had transformed completely. What began as a desperate British improvisation was now rewriting the playbook of mechanized combat. The Firefly had proven that agility and intellect could outmatch brute force, that steel alone wasn't what won battles, but the minds behind it. In the ruins of Caen and across the fields of Belgium, wrecked German armor told the story better than any communique. Tigers, once feared as invincible, were now husks, their thick plates pierced clean through by those long, slender 17-pounder shells. Allied photographers captured the scenes, blackened silhouettes of tanks, their turrets blown open like tin cans, their commanders staring in disbelief at the holes no one had thought possible. Back in England, reports from the front astonished the War Office. What had begun as a covert engineering gamble had evolved into one of the Allies' greatest tactical equalizers. The Firefly's kill records were extraordinary, and for the first time, tank crews who'd once gone into battle expecting to die had hope. But innovation doesn't rest. American ordnance officers studied the Firefly's gun, taking notes for the next generation of tanks, lessons that would culminate in the M26 Pershing and, years later, the Patton series. The race for better armor and deadlier guns would never stop, but the Firefly had shifted the momentum of that race forever. In Germany, the mood was different. Captured Wehrmacht officers spoke of the long-barreled terror that appeared without warning and struck from unimaginable range. Some even claimed the British had developed new secret ammunition. Others, perhaps more honest, admitted it was simply British engineering catching up and surpassing their own. For the men who crewed the Firefly, the war didn't feel like victory. It felt like endurance. They'd seen friends burned alive inside Shermans, heard the screams echo through Normandy nights. Yet when they walked past the shattered remains of a tiger, they knew finally that they'd turned the tide. The Firefly wasn't the fastest nor the toughest, but it represented something the Allies had lacked for too long: respect from the enemy. By war's end, over 2,000 Fireflies had rolled across Europe, from the beaches of Normandy to the heart of Germany, and when they finally reached the Rhine, their long barrels pointed east toward a defeated Reich that once thought itself untouchable. The German tank crews who once laughed at the Sherman never laughed again, because by then every plume of smoke on the horizon could be a Firefly waiting, silent, patient proof that even in war, innovation can rise from desperation and mockery can turn to awe.